Hey everybody, how you doing? It is Saturday morning. I thought I'd take you on a little tour of one of my favorite neighborhood sites, Fort Canning. I gave you a little preview of it last video, but thought I'd take you here for a little walk around because it's a really nice place. It's the earliest part of it was like the Central Park. It was considered the Central Park of Singapore. Now there's a lot of walking trails and stuff like that. It's really nice. It's not very big because it's really centrally located. We'll take a look around because it's got some history. And it starts with this amazing tree. Look at that thing. This is massive. Anyway, let's start with the walk. Our tour starts here. This area is called the Forbidden Spring because Fort Canning Park, back in the earliest days of the Malays, when they ran this joint, this was like the most sacred part of Singapore, and is supposedly where Singapore was really founded. So when they built the reservoir up at the top, here you can see a little bit of that later, they apparently found a bunch of old Javanese relics and things like that. This is apparently like the graveyard of the earliest kings of Singapore. We're in Fort Canning, and this beautiful patch is called the Forbidden Spring. Very peaceful on a day like today. As we go up the stairs to the top of Fort Canning, you'll notice we've got an escalator. How about that? It only runs between 8 and 5 on the weekdays, but it's nice to have. I'm feeling a little tired because this is the tallest hill in Singapore, so it's quite a jaunt to get up. Now at the top of the hill, going to the Fort Gate. Back in the 1860s, when Stamford Raffles sort of turned this area into the first fortress around Singapore, this was the original gate. I'm going to take you through this a little later because I think our first stop is going to be on some of the World War II history stuff, since that's the closest to me right now. Anyway, that poor child just took a digger. Oof. What you just saw back there was typical Singapore Saturday. You've got the mom hanging out behind me, dad over in the woods doing whatever he's doing, and the nanny watching the kid while the kid falls down and breaks his freaking neck. Because there's a lot of, the way that things work here is that help is cheap. So everyone's got a helper. The helpers basically watch the kids 6 days a week. So parents only have to be parents 1 day a week. That's Sunday. It's called payday for the help. Anyway, thought I'd share that little fun fact with you. You might be asking yourself, Mitchell, why are you showing me the Hotel Fort Canning? Why are you showing me a hotel in the middle of a park? And that's because before this was a hotel, this was the original British headquarters, military headquarters, when Singapore was not only a part of the British Empire, but it was also sort of the beachhead of their empire here in Southeast Asia. So this is where it all happened in the World War II. And when things got hot in the early 40s, when the Japanese were coming after them, this place right here became very important. This is the battle box, it's known as. There's a bunker, or a series of bunkers under Fort Canning, where people could hide and they could sort of close themselves off from the approaching Japanese, or the threat of the approaching Japanese. There's apparently about 30 rooms down here. Underneath there, it was a full sort of war room, etc. And it's got a generator and everything back from the early days. Anyway, a little history. As we come back up towards this wall, this is the original walls of the fort. It was built in the 1860s. We're going to see some of the remnants of the old fort shortly, but while I'm here, I thought I'd share it with you. We're now on top of the bunker. This sort of pyramid-shaped thing was the actual escape hatch for the bunker. Back in the day, in World War II, this would have been concealed by trees and things like that, so because it's basically the escape shaft. Over to the left, this open space now is where all the munitions were stored. It's now just sort of a little gentle park area. And then we circle back over to this direction. There's the child that fell down earlier. To the main gate of Fort Canning Park and the gate of the old park. This building is the last remaining of the soldiers' quarters that would have dotted this entire area back starting in the 20s through World War II. Then in the background, we're going to get a closer look at that shortly, is sort of the main Fort Canning building. It's not the original buildings from the fort. Those were all demolished at some point, but they were all rebuilt going into World War II. But it's a lot of fun here. This is a sort of nice green area. You can see where Singapore's actually taking the fun out of everything by gating off all the swings. And oh yeah, they put fencing around all the area so you can't go over there and just work out or, you know, maintain social distancing. Anyway, we're gonna walk down to the main green and check out the new fort building. This is Fort Canning Center. This is the main sort of building here. Pretty cool. It's a very nice sort of big open area. It's in the lovely green, which goes down to a nice little AstroTurf area. It's a place where people used to be able to work out. Along the walls there's it's like the old headstones from the cemetery that used to sit here. I'll take a little walk along that. It's nice and peaceful. And this little patch of AstroTurf is where I used to work out until they cordoned this area off to allow for safe distancing. The ironic thing is, you know, they put these stupid signs up that says, oh, we're so sorry, this area is temporarily closed to allow for safe distancing. So now instead of people actually spreading out across this entire area, everyone's sort of cordoned off in this 4-foot walkway. So we're actually, the government has errantly created a non-safe distancing corridor. Whatever. Nobody questions them, and I'm certainly not going to start doing that today. As I mentioned, the big area that I just showed you was the old cemetery. They appear to have moved all the bodies out and to put the headstones along this peaceful walkway that sort of goes down towards Orchard and the subway area called Dhoby Ghat. It's cool. There's lots of, you know, a lot of history here. People died in the 1840s, 1850s. These are the original settlers of the city, and they're memorialized here in this spot. This is an example of an archaeological dig that they are doing here on Fort Canning, because as I said earlier, this was the earliest and most sacred part of Singapore, where the kings were buried dating back to the 13th and 14th century. And so this is just one of the sites that they've started working on or have opened up for the public to come take a look at. And this is basically part of the old wall structure that encircled this area dating back a long time. As you walk along the pathway, you'll come across a couple of these cannons that were used or thought to be used to protect the fort, but when in fact they were installed about 50 years after the fort was built, and they're mostly decorative. Makes for a good story, I guess. Facing south towards Marina Bay Sands, here in the Raffles Garden, which is another peaceful spot perched on top of Fort Canning. Right here is one of the original lighthouses of Singapore from the 1900s. And you pass over here to good old Stamford Raffles house. This is not his original house, but this is where his house once stood. Now I'm going to take you to an old photograph past this burgee or flagstaff. And this is, and it's kind of hard to see, but this is what Boat Key used to look like. And if you look at the top of the hill here, that's Fort Canning. That's where we are right now. That right there is the White House. Anyway, it's another peaceful spot. You know what I don't see? Fencing, which means this would be a good place to come work out next week. But don't tell the Singaporeans. So I'm exactly on the opposite side of the park from where I came in. And this little area to my left and right is called the Spice Garden. It's a pretty precipitous, drop off down towards the CBD. But just to give you, again, some sort of geographical context, if I come down here and I go out onto that main drag and cross the street, about, 70 meters down the road is the Singapore Cricket Club. So this is just to give you some geographical context. But again, this area is full of little paths and stuff like that. It's very pretty. Being the highest spot here in Singapore, got some nice vistas of downtown coming up through Clarke Quay, if you remember that from last week. And then over towards Fort Canning MRT station, or subway station. Above the paths that I've been walking on is the reservoir, which sits on top of the hill here in Fort Canning. When they did the excavation a little before the turn of the century, it's where they found a lot of those 14th century relics of the Javanese settlers that were here. Can't go up there for any views, but it's worth pointing out. Anyway. Hey gang. Well, that concludes our tour of Fort Canning. I really enjoyed taking you into this little park because it's right down the street from where I currently live and will be living, and I spend a lot of time in here, and I really enjoyed, learning a little bit more about it, and so I can share it with you. Anyway, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.